What is happening, people? Steve Mayeda here with a daily awesome podcast. And today we are going to talk about DMT's effect, how it can actually be used in different situations for trauma, and also DMT when it comes to 12-step recovery, alcoholism, addiction, those sorts of things. So it's a pretty hot topic and a hot subject. And we're going to talk about how it can be beneficial in those ways and even ways that it can be harmful. But before you go anywhere, where this is actually being recorded, it's actually on for you 12-step people. It's on my clean date, which is July 26th. And I won't say the year because that's not important. It's all about the day, right? But we're on a Wednesday night call, and there's actually a lot of guys here talking about this stuff from all over the world. You know, we have people in Malaysia, we have people and actually Guam, we have people in Europe, we have people in the US and all over the Americas who are a part of this group. And we're talking about just how to better ourselves as men. That's super important. And you need that. This is such a massive thing. So if you're listening to this on iTunes or Stitcher, of course, give it some support, show it some love with your stars or thumbs up or whatever and reviews. But if you're also watching it on iTunes, leave a comment, talk to me, subscribe to the channel. I get back to everybody and let's make this a community. You can also get involved and join a group like our group by going down and clicking the free stuff link down below. You can watch the video there. You can also read more about the write-up. But more importantly, you can see how to get involved with our different groups. There's our Austin Men's Development Group. That's a free board. But also there's an AMD Plus board. And the difference is massive. It's just huge. Where at the time we're recording this, it's a $50 one-time payment. You get a ton of different products, lots of videos teaching you all sorts of different stuff on men's development, which goes into dating, fitness, mentality, purpose, all that sort of stuff. And man, it's just, it's so good. And then you get on our board where we're more of a community. And if you want to get on the calls, you can look into that. So go there, download the stuff. There's so much good things. We're all about community here. And that's really why we do this, so that we can coach and have our programs grow more, man. It's a freaking awesome thing. So let's get into this. So we hear about this a lot, and we hear about ayahuasca, DMT, mushrooms, and all the therapeutic reasons for it. But one of the things that I dislike so much about this is that we see it as a quick fix for our problems. Whereas the way in the experience that I'm going to lay out of how I witnessed some of this go through and actually experienced some of it myself, and also being in 12-step recovery. So I want to kind of like clear that up because it's a very controversial issue, is very different than looking for a simple solution. This is what we get to when we get to this kind of psychonaut mentality or culture and all these different things. And there's a diverse side to it too, because we should be seeing that. We should be wooed and amazed by these big deals of life because they're big deals, or intense experiences, or the pursuit of God or spirituality, or if you don't believe in that, the pursuit of something which is so amazing and is going to change your perspective. This is a normal and natural state of man. In fact, what's so important to know is that in all of time, so we hear about this a lot of like how men are violent, men are, it's in our blood, or in all of human history and expression, there's all these different things that have to be in man's life. But what's even more important about this is what has always been in our history through anthropology is the search and pursuit of different states of mind, getting closer to a deeper meaning. Now, there's all sorts of different theories about this, but what makes man so unique, even more unique than other mammals, is our ability to think and have identity in our purpose, in our ambition, in these types of things that we have. And so in that, we think there's got to be more. There's got to be something bigger. Now, in so many ways, man has caused destruction with this sort of mindset, but that is a normal mindset. And this is something that we have to get into. What we see, though, today is that natural pursuit of that normal mindset to find deeper meanings in our lives is the only thing that can repair us from the things that make us, hurt or angry or sad, or perhaps dealing with different traumas and so on. This is where we can get into trouble with a lot of the psychonaut experiences. This is one of the things I do not like about many people talking about ayahuasca. Now, I know plenty of sane people that have done ayahuasca, but people who get really into ayahuasca, in fact, this is a podcast. I've heard so much shit for this. The quote of the fucking podcast, well, I might botch it, but is people who are really into ayahuasca are insane. And that's what I find is people that are really into finding this experience outside of yourself to cure the problems or the lostness or the different type of man, I don't know who I am, or I feel depressed or sad, or I have anxiety, or I'm bipolar, or something along those lines, or I can't get over a breakup. This sort of thing, we start looking for this chase of a solution. And man, that is terrible. I don't see it as something that really harms people, but I see it as something which does not fix people. It fixes somebody for a day. They get back from their trip and they said, man, I did a 3-day journey or a 5-day or whatever it is, a 1-day journey in ayahuasca. And she told me so much. And the spirit animal of the jungle says that I need to focus on fucking, this form of art or whatever. And they go and do that. And then they still keep having the same problems in their life. This is not a functional form of therapy. This is not a functional form of something that can help you. Now there's the other side of it. So myself being a 12-stepper and having experimented with this, and I have not experimented with much, I'm something that believes in working my own sort of hardcore program, but I'm very married to it. It's influenced me. And I would even say it's probably the greatest teacher. If there was one system that I did doing those steps and being a part of those groups was huge. And then it's like, well, look, you can't do that. You can't do these things. It will trigger you. You put a drop of alcohol or drug in your body. You get carried away into this obsessive thing. What's so interesting about addiction and what is happening is there's so much information that comes from the 12-step communities, which is beautiful and great, and not enough people listen to it. Not enough people do. It's really sad. But there's so much that comes from just the therapy, the psychological side of addiction that doesn't communicate so much to the 12-step side. And then there's this other part, which is the neuroscience side, or we'll make the neuroscientists up here. In the neuroscientist side, it's almost like everybody's speaking against each other. And there's so many great breakthroughs happening with that. And there's so many different breakthroughs of how people deal with this very real problem and a very social problem of addiction or drug addiction or sex addiction or alcoholism or all these different things. And there's so many different ways to deal with it. One of my things, and this is where people will disagree with me, a lot of people would say I'm not clean or I've broken those things. It's something that I meditated on and talked about and researched heavily, not only just interviewed people for 2 years, but also talked with people who were in the neuroscience world dealing with this and the different effects of it. It's something that I feel very confident or comfortable about. And this recovery thing, you have these different sponsors that you run by things. And he said, hey, look, in our program, we do not do any drugs, any mind or mood altering substance. And that's my choice, but I respect your choice. And I even told him, I said, hey, look, I just want to try it. I'm not looking for any big fix. I've fixed most of my issues with running through the steps with you multiple times. And hopefully you know that. And if there's anything more to get, there's something more to get, but I want to do it mainly because this exploration in this thing we call recovery and addiction, which has taught me so much in my life. If it turns out that addiction is activated, where I get into the obsessive, compulsive, different areas of my life, if I get into starting to use again or those types of things, then I will pick up a new key tag. I will, reset my clean date and all those things. You never know because addiction's a beast, but when it gets activated, I'll come back to the rooms and those things and start over. I do not worry about that. That I'm so very confident of, and that's why I've told a bunch of different people about it to work with me on. In any case, none of those things seem to have happened, right? When I did the experience. Why I did it was to once again explore different concepts of recovery, my own personal relationship with addiction, and then also because I'm curious to find different elements of seeing new things in my life. The way I did it, and I also did it with other people in recovery. In fact, the guy who set up the whole thing, who's an actual drug and alcohol therapist, we set it up and he's also in recovery. And it's, and obviously some people would disagree with how he does things, but we also talked about it for a long time about how those things different go. Why this is so important, if you're not a 12-step person and you just want to trip on DMT or whatever, why this is so important is because the angle we took with this is a long-term process. Before, for multiple days, we talked about what we wanted to get at, what we wanted to feel, where we were thinking about different things. And for me, like I said, there wasn't that big of an emergency. There were other people who I was with, and I've experienced enough trauma in my life to say I've had my fair share of trauma and I'm qualified to sit in that arena. But I've worked through it in so many different ways. I've worked through it with doing step work. It's just kind of like the equivalent of a cognitive behavioral therapy. I have worked through it in bioenergetics, which is working with my body and so on. I've worked with it in so many ways, and I still feel some of it come out and so on. But there were other guys who were hitting walls in certain areas where the step work or whatever wasn't enough to get to where they wanted. Now, you could argue that or whatever, you're hardcore recovery people, you could, but where I saw these guys go and take with it is very different. So when they were dealing with their trauma of abuse or sex abuse or violence, or maybe violence that they did or had done to them or whatever, these different things that just sat with them that were so tough, that were shut out. And we all know who've experienced massive trauma is then you tell a story in your head about it and it turns into this crazy thing that is just so screwed up, and it's a horrible way to live. And part of that is the fuel, the bedrock, the foundation for addiction to sink its teeth into, and then turns you into really, man, a crazy person. It's so bizarre. But what happened is in this experience, they were able to process through that, through talking about it beforehand, then doing the DMT or the toad medicine or whatever you want to call it. And that's the version that was done. And in doing that, they were then able to process the separation of themselves and those things. And that's really a beautiful thing. What I know from my own trauma is that at first there were things that I thought had to be me. It ensured that this could only be me and this could not release from anything else. That we were married to it, or maybe I willed it, or that I was a part of it, whether it was having to do with sex abuse or child abuse, or it had to do with an excess of violence or different things that I had seen, that this had to have been me, that I could not change, that no matter what I would do, these things were a part of me. Now, in so many years and so much work, I had to force myself and do so many different angles of different therapy to get past that. And it did work in different ways, and it was great. And then after that, I experimented with other things like, if you see me do the Wim Hof method, very, very similar to DMT. I could talk about that a lot. Hopefully I'll come back to that, maybe even in another video, because there's a lot of correlation that could be said to that. I've done the ice baths, I've done Wu Chi Fa, I've done different things with yoga, and even jujitsu, you could say, with there's so much to that where those things tied together. But where I saw these guys take it, it was like, oh my God, that's not me. And I see the potential of it. In the experience, it's very intense. It's short. We then decompress afterwards. We talk about it. We talk about the different things. But what seems to happen after that was a motivation then to perhaps work the steps on those different things. The motivation to continue to pursue those in our lives, and actually the commitment and the accountability amongst each other to continue on these paths of where we could look at. That I could look at somebody that I did this was like, hey, no, you told me and believed it. And remember that moment where you felt love unconditionally. And that was a part of you. How do we get back to there? Because right now you're not talking in that way. And how do we get back to there without having to rely on this intense experience? And rather than looking at everything as these extraordinary things moving us, let's see the extraordinary in the ordinary, in the simple, normal actions of life. So it's something that we could process in those ways. And that's really how we had our experience of doing it. A very, very awesome thing. One thing that I do want to talk about that I kind of mentioned, and of course I'll probably make more videos about this, is that if you were curious about this sort of thing, now I walked into it without a need to do it, without an urgency, even without nervousness. There was some questioning about like, would this trigger something within me? Because like literally I've not done I haven't done anything in a long time, or a long enough time. We'll say that. I don't want to be too cocky about it. But the thing is I have gotten high in many ways. And again, the pursuit of that is not bad. I've done that through breathing, holotropic breathing, Wim Hof breathing, doing all sorts of different yogic breathing. I've also done ice baths. I've also done saunas, where these are different things where your body releases hormones and you feel many things. There are still so many, like doing an ice bath for 30 minutes at 34, 36 degrees Fahrenheit or 2 Celsius or whatever you want to call it is a pretty insane thing. And you have to build up to it. You can't I couldn't do it right now. It'd take me about 2 weeks to be able to build up to something like that. But you feel very similar. Doing breathing, much like holotropic breathing or Wim Hof method breathing, which I recommend to everybody, you will feel the exact things that you feel at the beginning part of administering or taking the DMT or the toad that I took. It's pretty amazing. it's pretty cool. I was able to let go of that. I was able to have peace with it because I've literally felt that feeling over 100 times while doing breathing and breath work. The only difference is, and this is the very safe and beautiful thing about breath work, is that it will only last for a few seconds. And once you come back to normal breathing, it immediately vanishes. Or there might be residue of something, but you'll get out of a state which is too impossible to control. So, I would recommend experimenting with that. I always thought about it, it's like, man, is this something that is similar to, from what I hear people describe with it? It's extremely similar and I would say equally intense, but just for a 3-second period of, the different moments or parts when you do the Wim Hof stuff. So what I would really walk away from this and with people to know is that the most important things that are going to change you is not going to be a big moment in your life ever. The other thing that I would say is for people that are involved in a 12-step or recovery program, you don't need to worry about this right away. I would really recommend going through the steps and really heavily recommend that, of doing that in earnest effort all the way through. I mean, I've done it 3 times and I've done it in some simple ways and then some very intense ways of going through the steps. I would not recommend looking at this for a quick fix. And I would also recommend working with a therapist who has done drug and alcohol counseling and had many years in that and has a lot of experience with that. The other thing I would say is that you have to realize that what makes an addict is not just the drug. I get it that with the AA folks, they say, it's an allergy of the body, obsession of the mind, and that once we put alcohol in our body, it gets triggered. Now, I actually do believe that. I think that if I got drunk, it would carry me over. But the interesting thing about addiction, if you look at the different stats of it, and this is super crazy, there's so much of this. If you tag me in a comment, I'll put a link to the different sites or whatever, is that with drugs, even habitual use of heroin, habitual use of cocaine, habitual use of methamphetamines, habitual use of alcohol, it's somewhere within 10% to 20% of the people that habitually do that are the only ones who experience addiction, right? The more dense and complex and spread out and disconnected our society gets, the higher that number has gone up. But that's still only, now 20% is a lot, 10% is a lot. That's enough to freak the fuck out about and take it very, very seriously. But that being said, there's people that don't get addicted. So why do they not get addicted? Or why are they resistant to perhaps heroin addiction, but then they go and have a gambling addiction? Well, this has to do with their different social experiences. And that's how the theory goes. And there's actually more research on this than anything. So it has to go in with their childhood, how they grew up, how they feel about themselves, and the different void they're filling with different stuff and where that high takes them. In order for a high to mean something to you, to mean something bigger than it is, means that you can't have it within yourself. The best way to get there is to focus on those things with a good foundation of some form of real therapy or whatever sort of support group, or come in with a sane mind. And then I'd say experience all the different things and the wonders of the world, because I really believe it is your right of man to be able to experience what you think is a higher meaning of stuff. This isn't something that I plan to do a lot. I really don't like it when I hear people who do stuff that they take mushrooms once a week or once every whatever just to get some insight. No, man, I want real life. I want my basic things. I want normal social conversation with the common person. I want walking down the street. I want looking at the world out there to be my reflection of what I consider a higher power, which is life for me. That's what I would title God, is the biology and the nature of things. I want that to speak to me. I want that to be my home base of what I feel comfortable and beautiful and where I look for the answers in my life. And every once in a while, I want to sneak into something that is a little bit of a higher level. Now, I do that with breathing. I do that with meditation. I do that with different forms of praying or offering what I think to the world to bounce it off of. And I also, most importantly, do that with talking to other people and being social and connecting in these beautiful, beautiful communities. In any case, guys, I've been talking for about 20 minutes. My call is going on. We're recording this live. It's almost 10 p.m. here in Austin. I actually have to go to pick up my tag to represent my clean time. But I'll talk to you guys on the phone on the way there. And if you want to be involved in this, what you got to do is click that free stuff link down below. Get involved with what we do, because we're a men's group that really deals with connecting with people on all these different issues. So if you have things like depression or anxiety, or you have different sex issues or addiction or sexual dysfunction, there's even people who are incapable of actually having sex and have had that taken away from them in different tragedies in their life. But we all talk and we look for the best self in so many different ways. So hopefully this was helpful. Subscribe, leave comments, leave likes and stars or wherever you're listening to and watching this, and support this so the message can get broadcast out here, because this is all about helping you, working with you, and building our community. And if you don't believe that that's my real message, join our communities, sit around and watch how passionate we are about this. In any case, you guys have a great day. I'll talk to you guys soon. Laters.